Hello, everybody, and welcome back this week to the Unmasking podcast. It is just me this week, and I have a really special guest that I'm super excited to introduce. We are finishing up our Menopause series, and I got in touch with an LPC, so a licensed professional counselor in our area who actually specializes in working with women who are in perimenopause menopause stages of life. And so she is so kind to agree to come on here with us today. And before I get started with our conversation, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background information on Mandi Dixon. Mandi is a licensed professional counselor and national certified counselor. She has an MHR degree as well as an MA degree in clinical mental health counseling. She's trained in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, also person-centered therapy, and EMDR, so eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. She uses this in her practice to help her clients build coping skills, manage distress, and improve their mental health. She's also an active member of the Menopause Society, where she stays up to date on the latest research and techniques in menopause and women's health to provide the highest quality of support. She's trained as an ADHD coach, and although she doesn't currently provide coaching services in that area, you will want to check her out after today's episode and just learn a little bit more about the services that she provides. She currently has a practice in Allen, Texas, which is really close to Frisco, for those of you who are not in the DFW area. So thank you, Mandi, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yes, me as well. And I was chatting with Mandi before we hopped on here to record, and I was just sharing with her that after my conversation with Mary Turner and looking at the medical side of menopause, I again was really excited to have Mandi on because she's going to provide a little bit more on the mental health side of perimenopause and menopause for us. But before we get started talking about that, Mandi, I wonder if you could just share with our listeners a little bit about your background. So how you were drawn towards working with women in this life stage.
Yeah, so I was working at a group practice, and so I saw all ages, all issues pretty much. I got a lot of great experience working there. And I noticed that with women in midlife that were similar to my age, which I was like late 30s, I guess, probably mid 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So women that typically were around that age and a little older, I would see just a theme with them, and I recognized it because I was kind of having the same thing happening with me, where they would come in and they would just describe as not feeling like themselves.
Yeah.
And they would often be referred by, they'd go to their doctor or their gynecologist first, and they would, recommend them to come to counseling. And so that's sort of where I would meet them. And, just talking to them, I could see that it wasn't depression. It didn't seem like that. And, there was oftentimes some anxiety there, but not really enough to make an anxiety diagnosis. It just felt different. And I just remember it because I felt that same way myself. And I had gone to my doctor, the same thing. I don't feel like myself. Something's off. I think it's my
Yeah.
hormones. So they could never really give me any answers. And I myself was kind of going to doctor, trying to be treated, as depression, but I just knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. It just didn't feel like that. Um,
Yeah.
Also, it felt like anxiety, but not the same as like general anxiety disorder. It just didn't seem to fit that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started really hunkering down on myself of really trying to figure out what was going on with me. And I'm telling you, doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor over the
Yeah.
course of about 6 years. Um, and I don't remember how I ever heard when I did finally hear the word perimenopause and understood what that was the actual science behind it, it's like, oh my gosh, that's what this is. And it
Yeah.
finally made sense of how
Mhm.
I felt. Well, then I just had this like uproar and, inside of like all of these women that I had seen in the past and currently had no understanding of how hormones can impact your mental health.
Yeah.
And it really just set me on a mission. I joined the Menopause Society as a clinician and
Hmm.
really started learning more, reading everything that I could, talking with other experts. That's been a lot of help too. A lot of them, most of them are in the medical profession. So I've learned a lot from them. And I just felt like I really wanted to not only, but primarily work with women in midlife. So
Yeah.
I opened my own practice, and so that's what I've been doing, and it's been amazing. It's been wonderful. It's really given me the opportunity to learn more and
Yeah.
to really advance my knowledge in this area. I spend a lot of time with other providers as well. And like I said, it's just an ongoing learning thing. And I very much enjoy it. It is truly my passion.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that because, I think that's one of the things that I've learned in doing my own research on perimenopause and menopause is that there's a lack of understanding slash education from
Yeah,
even sometimes our healthcare professionals, and
yeah,
I'm learning that they themselves didn't receive a lot of this training on this stage of life for women, and so I love that you saw a need, you were experiencing your own need, and then went out there and kind of became an advocate, not only for yourself, but
yeah,
this community of women who want to not only just survive this stage, but really
yeah,
thrive in this
yeah.
part of their life. So that's really cool. And I wonder, you mentioned that you started noticing some things when you were maybe in that perimenopause stage, and for a lot of women, they're not even really sure if they are in perimenopause or what is it even? And so I'm wondering if you could provide a little bit of information on some signs and some symptoms that are typical for women, and why do you think women are feeling so caught off guard during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, the definition of perimenopause is the stage leading up to menopause.
Yeah.
It can last anywhere from 4 to 10 years. I think it can last a little longer. That's just what I've seen in my experience, but the research says about 4 to 10 years. And
Okay.
so, what happens is our estrogen that our body makes, our ovaries make, it starts to gradually decline. And
Mhm.
in this period, it starts to steadily decline and it becomes more volatile. So that means some days it may be really high and some days it may be really low, but overall it's starting to decline. And so estrogen impacts our serotonin in our brain. It has a direct impact on it. And so if we know what serotonin is, um, that's what makes us, has a lot to do with our mood, our happiness, sadness, things like that, kind of our feel good hormone, not
Mhm.
hormone.
Feel good chemical in the brain.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
following.
And
Yeah.
so, when you start to see that decline and even, the shifting, and we call perimenopause the roller coaster or the zone of
Mm.
chaos. And that's
Yeah.
because estrogen can fluctuate so greatly.
Yeah.
And so that's when you might experience the mood swings or the sadness or even a depression or hopelessness that can come on too. And so that really is kind of the impact that estrogen has on our brain in terms of mental health.
Hmm.
And then you also have progesterone, which is another hormone that our body makes, and it starts to steadily decline. And it doesn't do the volatile swings that estrogen does. It's just a steady decline. And so
Yeah.
what that looks like is progesterone acts on the GABA in our brain, and
Hmm.
that's the calm, the feel good, the peaceful sort of part of our brain. So when that starts to decline, we can experience things like anxiety or irritability. That's oftentimes how it presents. And that's what causes you to, or part of what causes you to wake up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and can't go back to sleep. And so if you kind of look at the chemistry of what's happening, is you have these two hormones that are steadily declining that have direct impact on your mental health. And so that can often explain some of what you're feeling. But now, as a woman in midlife, if you have something like you're irritable or mood swings or you can't sleep, it's really hard to know that it is your hormones, because those can be causes of lots of things that are happening to women in midlife. And so something that I like to really focus on is, most of the time when you are starting to have these mood shifts or mental health symptoms, really pay attention to what's going on physically as well, because when your estrogen starts to decline, you can often have physical symptoms that come with that. And so that would look like, well, I mean, a hot flash or a night sweat is a really good indicator that something's going on, because that can't often be explained by anything else. There's joint pain that can happen. Sometimes that can be attributed to something else, but the joint pain, vaginal dryness is one. That's a pretty good indicator that your hormones are starting to decline. And so really take a look at those mental health symptoms, and then look at your physical symptoms. And if you're seeing some of both, then that's a good indicator that you're in perimenopause. And then of course, like your age, that's, if you're 23, this is probably not what's going on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I was listening actually to a podcast episode this morning where they were talking about how, if you really look at the timing of when all of this starts to happen in a woman's life, there can be a lot of parallels with life changes and shifts. So this is the time of life where a lot of us are starting to launch kids out into the world and think about what our second half of our life is going to look like. And there's this maybe impending empty nest thing happening, and our bodies start to change in ways that we don't recognize ourselves anymore. So not only is there the physical effects that are happening, or the symptoms rather, but then I got to think where mental health comes into play too, in addition to the mood swings caused by the hormonal changes, is this grappling with identity shifts. Like, I was once this, and this was my role, and this is how I was contributing. And now all of a sudden, my body's changing and my life stage is changing as well. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about, what you see in your practice with relationship shifts, day-to-day life. All of a sudden, I'm not, fulfilling this role anymore. I'm struggling, I'm grieving. What do you see with women?
Yeah, I think that's very common, in midlife, especially during this transition. Relationships, what I like to tell women is that our ways that we have always done things, if we try to keep doing things that same way during perimenopause and menopause, oftentimes they just don't work. And we feel like a failure because this is how we've always done it. Why isn't it working? It has to be me. I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not working hard enough. And it's not true, because our brains are changing, our bodies are changing, and we have to shift our perspective a lot and sort of realign and rethink about this next chapter. And it's not that we are like changing who we are. We're just adjusting to this new version. And and if you look at the course of your life, we have been different versions of ourselves all through our life. We were young in our 20s and who knows what. And then we probably became caretakers in some way, or focused on a career, or both. And, we're the jugglers, we're the managers, we have this role. And then now, what is this role? And I think that there's this stereotypical, image of menopause, and it's hot flashes and it's being old, and
Yeah.
that is not it. And man, I'll really get on the soapbox about that sometimes.
Please. Yes. Yes. Please do.
So I wrote a blog about this mental clarity, that women can have in midlife, and how we can
Yeah.
use this transition just to really readjust our views on who we are and the ways that we do things, and then how this clarity can happen. So
Yeah.
it was featured on this website, and I just submitted the text part of it because it wasn't working or something. Anyway, so they posted it, and it was a picture. They had selected a picture of this frail old lady covered in a shawl, because I guess they saw it was, about menopause, and they just picked a picture that sort of went with it. And
Wow.
oh my gosh,
Wow.
yes. Like, oh, it just never stops. But no, I
Yeah.
think for the most part, people have this view of what they think menopause is, and it means, the ending, or it means, I don't want to say a loss of life, but a loss of vitality. And it's
Mm.
just simply not true. It's not true at all. And so I can't remember your original question.
Yeah, yeah, just it was really, and you answered it. It was really just more geared towards like what are you seeing? I mean, I
Yeah.
assume you see women that come in that are just in a place of confusion and frustration, and maybe even experiencing a little bit of grief because they don't know how to just reckon with this change. And from what I'm hearing, at least on my end, is that you help women not only embrace it, or there's a bit of a reframe, right? There's a huge reframe I think
Exactly.
that has to happen, helping
Yeah.
women embrace it, and then also be able to look at it as like, oh, like I get to decide what this next phase of my life looks like. I don't have to be in a shawl hunkered over.
Exactly. And I think it's a lot of the frustration of what you had been doing isn't working anymore. And you know
Yeah.
that you have to do it differently, but you don't know how. And a lot of the frustration is a lot of women are just ready to do things differently. They're ready
Yes.
to, maybe do something that they didn't have time to do before, or they didn't have the courage to do before. And so much breaking people pleasing tendencies happen in this phase of life.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the hormone changes can really fuel that, just that, no, I don't want to do that, or no, I don't like that. And having the courage and the tools to sort of be able to say that in a kind way, express yourself in a kind way when maybe you never thought to do that in the past. And so
Yeah.
it's such the perfect time to just really address those issues that have kind of been, maybe you've pushed them down, or maybe you've held them back. And your body is changing, your mind is changing, everything is changing. So let's harness that change, and just really, set you up for the next stage of life, because it's so wonderful. It can be so wonderful for so many women.
Sure. So with change, maybe there's some liberation as well.
Yes, I see that a lot. I see that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking about, the boundary work that often starts to come from this midlife stage too, where it's
Oh,
like if
yeah.
I've been all things to all people, or I've been put in this specific role by others in my life, and perhaps it's not all bad, right? Like I'm thinking of my own life personally, like I chose a lot of these roles, and they have been really gratifying, and they've also been extremely challenging. But when you're trying to break out of a role that people have maybe kind of always seen you as and step into something else, that can be quite daunting.
It really can be. Yeah, and I think support during that is definitely key. And a
Yeah.
lot of times some women, maybe they are losing this role that they've always had, or that they've had for a good part of their life, and they don't know what the next role is. They don't even know what they want it to look like, because they've never
Mm,
really thought about it.
yeah.
They've never, maybe they've just never had time to really sit down and think about who they are actually, and what they actually want. And when the career and the kids and the caretaking is gone, what is left there? And
Yeah.
it's just a perfect time to discover it for those women who, held on to those different roles their entire life.
Sure, sure. I can imagine that this work feels incredibly rewarding when you can help women understand how to reframe this in a way where they can use it as an empowerment versus
Yes,
like, this is just happening to me and there's nothing I can do about it, but I'll just lay down. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that the women that have been in this area before us, I think that was what they had to do, a lot of them, because a
Hmm.
lot of doctors, a lot of other clinicians would just say, like, this is what happens.
Sure.
You're, this is just a part of life and this is what happens. And now we're sort of reframing that narrative to, yes, this is happening. This is what is happening, but there
Hmm.
are treatments available that can help you with the physical symptoms, with the emotional symptoms. And also, there's a whole different way that you can look at this.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me think of the podcast episode with, was it Brene Brown and Dr. Mary Claire Haver, where they were talking about, how their mothers and grandmothers did menopause. And as a result of the lack of education, the cognitive decline, and things
Yeah.
that could have been prevented, it was just really unfortunate to see a lot of our mothers and grandmothers age in a way where they didn't have a lot of agency or knowledge about how to do this. And I'm wondering, what are some of your biggest, like, surprising takeaways, perhaps from how maybe you witnessed it, or just your own experience in general? Did anything surprise you about your own findings with perimenopause and menopause?
Um, I think I was most surprised at how easy it is to manage symptoms with hormone therapy. I
Yeah,
mean, I think that a lot, there's so much menopause information out there now, and that's wonderful. But sometimes I feel like they make it a little complicated,
yeah,
try and overcomplicate it, try and sell you a lot of things that, they may brand as menopause this or menopause that. But really, the solution or a part of the solution isn't that difficult in terms of when you're talking about hormone therapy.
okay,
Now, there's tweaking and there's adjusting and there's all that, but I mean, it's your body is losing estrogen and progesterone and also
yeah,
testosterone, and so um, oftentimes working to supplement those can make a
hmm,
world of difference. So that is, I think, the most surprising thing for me personally, going through this whole years and years and years of the perimenopause mess of trying to figure out what it was when the solution was something so simple, over the counter, not over the counter,
yeah, like from a
prescription,
compound. Hmm.
yeah, or even at the pharmacy where the insurance covers it. That's what I'm thinking about. Cost effective.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so
yeah,
that was really surprising to me.
yeah. No, that's a good point, because I think 20, 30 years ago, when all of this was just starting to come on the scene, we just didn't know this information. And so a lot of women were being diagnosed with things that actually maybe weren't the problem, and being given like medical interventions that maybe perhaps wasn't what was needed when our bodies were indeed just losing estrogen and progesterone.
Yeah, and they used to give hormone therapy, and then the big Women's Health Initiative study came out and said it was dangerous, so they
Yeah.
took it away. And I saw a
Yes.
statistic the other day of prescriptions for women. So back then, before the study, estrogen was a
Hmm.
big being prescribed a lot to women. Then the study came out
Hmm.
and the prescriptions just drastically declined. And you know what went up? SSRIs. Because women were
Yes.
struggling and then they had all of that taken away. So, how else? Now they're having all of these symptoms, and the only thing that they can prescribe is an SSRI because they don't know what else to do. So, I think now
Yes.
we're unlearning that. And some
Hmm.
doctors and medical providers are still under that same sort of notion, but I think that's changing, and I think that's a good thing. And that women do have lots of
Yes.
options. And with all of this knowledge, and some women don't want to take the hormone therapy or they can't take it. And there are other options, now
Hmm.
that we have studied it more and know more about it. So there is something for
Yeah.
everyone if you're struggling.
Yes. And you don't have to suffer is
You
what I'm
don't
hearing
have
you
to
say.
suffer. Yeah. And another thing that I
Yeah.
do just want to touch on, since we do work in mental health, there are some women, a
Hmm.
very, I would say, see, I think I saw the research. 30% of women say that their perimenopause symptoms can be debilitating or greatly
Hmm.
impact their quality of life. And there's
Yeah.
even a smaller percentage of those women who, can become suicidal. They can, it
Yeah.
can really have a horrible impact on their mental health. Women who have been hospitalized or maybe have to be,
Mhm.
it takes a real hit on them. And so, I think that we make jokes about, the mood swings and the hot flashes and this and that. And that's, I think we have to joke about it a lot of times, because a lot of times we're all experiencing it. But there is a small percentage of
Yeah.
women who it hits really hard, really hard.
Yes.
And suicide
Yes.
rates for women are at their highest between ages, I think it is 40, 46 and 54. Don't quote me on that, but it's
Wow.
somewhere. Yeah, that's the highest suicide rate for
Sure.
women. Yeah, a lot of people think it's teens or, sometime in that, but
Hmm.
it's not. It's right there in midlife. And I think that, we need to
Yes.
be mindful of that as mental health clinicians, to watch out for that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that stat up because I do see a lot of women in my practice that come in that are just in despair.
Yeah.
They've been told the wrong information, or they've been, told that, well, maybe it's just this instead of this, right? But
Oh,
they're
yeah.
desperate for some answers and for somebody to listen. And also maybe there's a little bit of fatigue from advocating so much and maybe
Oh,
not being heard. Yeah.
yeah. Or being told, this is all in your head, or there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you. That can just
Hmm.
really beat you down. And it's very hard to trust people. It's very hard to open back up after that happens. So
Absolutely.
they'll often just suffer in silence. I know my own mom, she went through a really rough time with perimenopause, and that was, or they definitely didn't know what was going on. And she was just given, I think it
Hmm.
was Xanax, and
Hmm.
said, just deal with it.
Yep.
And she said, I hated taking it because it just made me sleep, but at least I wasn't feeling so irritable. And
Yes.
it just, I don't know, and it made her very reluctant to ask any other doctors for help, because they were so dismissive about all of it.
Of
So I
course.
see that happen. I'm just very hopeful that that's changing the more we talk
Yes.
about it, but sadly, it does still happen.
Absolutely. It's just kind of, something to be aware of, that
Yeah.
when we are working with people, women
Yes.
who are experiencing this, we want to encourage them to continue to advocate. And luckily, I'm so grateful for, organizations that are now, compiling lists of practitioners that
Yes.
specialize in this so that women can go and be heard and hopefully get some relief other than just taking a Xanax. Because yes, I have a really similar experience. I mean, I watched my grandmother and my mother just really struggle deeply in this part of life. And I don't think it was until my early 20s until we ever really uttered the word menopause in
Yeah.
relationship to this. I think it was just like, Nana's had a hard day and she needs to go lay down,
Yeah.
And when I look back, I think like, oh, I think I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
That perhaps it was menopause, I mean, and there were other stressors, of course, but I mean,
Yeah.
nobody ever really even uttered that
Yeah.
in my
Nobody
home
talked
growing
about
up.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if we can switch over to the therapy side of things, because I don't know if you've seen this or not, and this is probably inaccurate, but I was on social media and I saw a statistic, and I think it was like upwards of like 75% of marriages end in this stage of life. And what we're learning now is that we're thinking a lot of it contributes to perimenopause and menopause, where there's a miscommunication or there's a breakdown of communication at some point, and women are wanting to be heard or asking to be seen in this way. And so it can create a lot of relational struggle. And I'm wondering what you see as far as that goes. Like, do you treat couples? Do you ever, talk with men in this area who are
Oh,
dealing
yeah.
with it?
It definitely impacts relationships. I would be interested on that statistic too, because I would imagine it's very, very high. It
Yeah.
just and if it isn't divorce, it's some type of relationship issues that can happen. Um,
Hmm.
I think a lot of it has to do with obviously the mood swings. Mood swings impact that, but
Yeah.
also there's a lot of physical things that happen, in midlife or during this transition. So a lot of women have a little interest in sex and their libido
Hmm.
declines.
Yeah.
Um, the vaginal dryness may make it just painful and you don't want to. So intimacy is often affected, during this time.
Hmm.
And so that just impacts a marriage anyway, especially if you're not talking.
Yeah.
If you don't have that good communication, which a lot of people, you don't always have the best communication. So when
Sure.
something starts to sort of shake it, it can cause a lot of problems. So, and maybe I do work with men, especially, and it's more of like a psychoeducational
Hmm.
session. I sort of let them know what's going on with their lady, and um, they love asking questions, and they ask the best questions. The men do, yeah.
I'm
And it's,
sure.
I mean, every session I've had, the men are just like, they're on the edge of their seat, and
Oh,
they just had no idea, that
yeah.
this is going on, and it's just been so rewarding to work with men in that way,
Hmm.
and they're there because they want to be supportive to their lady, their partner. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand it, and oftentimes we can look at how they can support what's going on. And
Yeah.
that can look different for every woman. It's kind of unique as to what she needs. I don't specifically work with couples. I usually refer out for when it's couple
Hmm.
issues, because I'm just not that great at couple work, but I do love working with men. It's really great. And
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I would be interested to see that statistic
That,
about how much it
yes.
does impact marriages.
Absolutely. And it's so refreshing to hear that when men can come from a place of curiosity versus judgment, that there
Oh yeah.
is so much that they can learn in terms of how to support their partner during this time. Because even 5 years ago, I think we would say menopause, and you kind of get the eye rolls sometimes from men, and that's not all men. So I don't want to pick on men right now, but if we can encourage our partners to come from a place of curiosity and support,
Yeah.
then they can better empathize, because as we know, it's just all about being believed. There's nothing more frustrating than being discounted when we are going through something that can feel so isolating and
Yes,
frustrating. Yeah.
it very much is. And it
Sure.
gives men sort of a place to talk about, you know, it can hurt a lot if your partner, your wife is yelling at you now and snapping at you, and, you know,
Hmm.
being irritable about things and not wanting anything to do with you physically. Like that can impact men a
Yeah.
lot. And sometimes it's good for them to understand they're not the issue, this is what's going on.
Hmm.
And it helps them to like really understand it and not take it personal, because I think a lot of
Sure.
times they can, because it can feel very personal.
Absolutely. Because not
Yeah.
only are the roles changing for the
Yeah.
woman, but the roles are changing as a couple, and,
Yeah.
how they maybe operated for the first 25 years of marriage is now all of a sudden night and day different. And that can
Yep.
feel really confusing, I
Hmm.
imagine. Yeah. Absolutely. So when you have a woman come into your practice and you've identified that she might be in perimenopause or menopause, what would you say from a mental health perspective are some of the top, like, I guess, tools or let's see, like takeaways that you really work on with them, specifically like boundary work, self-compassion, like what's your go-to?
Well, I think it's unique for each one, but I think that reducing stress is probably pretty universal to every single client that I've seen
Yeah.
because stress can make everything worse. It can make all the work you're doing not as effective. It can
Hmm.
greatly impact your sleep. It greatly impacts your mood and your physical health as well.
Yeah.
So, something that I love working with or just talking about when we talk about stress is what is stress like what is it what is stressful in your life because a lot of
Yeah.
people think that it's just bad things, it's somebody got fired, somebody is getting bullied, financial problems, but stress can also be you got a new puppy and your
Yeah.
world is shook, like that's stressful, but you don't think of
Yes,
getting a puppy as stressful, but it is.
it is.
Your child just got a full ride scholarship to their dream school and they're about to leave. That's a happy thing, but that's really stressful. And so we need to really identify all the areas of stress and
Yeah.
recognize that there are good things that happen to us that can also be stressful. And
Hmm.
it's about sort of, I think, whenever we open our eyes to everything that's going on and see it, for what it is, it can really help us manage it.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I would imagine that that's where a lot of the boundary work comes in, right? Because oftentimes the things
Definitely.
that we identify as stressors in our lives, we don't even recognize that we have a choice in a lot of it. Or perhaps if we do recognize we have a choice, it can feel really daunting to have those hard conversations about eliminating some of those stressors,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the things that worked for me are no longer working for me. And so helping women practice the language of saying no or, reprioritizing things
Yes.
can be, I would think, a big topic that comes up a lot.
And I can use an example of that just from my own self.
Sure.
So I've always done the laundry at our house because my
Mhm.
boys, I just don't always trust them to do it. But
Yeah.
the older one does know how to do it now. So
Yeah.
I've really had to make sleep a big priority for myself lately because
Hmm.
it's been a little funky lately. So I've been really
Hmm.
trying to focus on it. So I need to be, try to be in bed and wind down at a certain time. So the
Yeah.
other night, my son came in to me at 9 o'clock and he's like, Mom, I need you to wash my jacket. And I said, well, you have two other jackets just like that are clean. No, I need this black one. And I said, I'm sorry, but I can't do laundry tonight.
Yeah.
And I really expected a big kickback from him, but he didn't. He said, okay, I'll do it. And I was like, yes,
The
okay,
magic
yes, you
words.
will. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I went and I got in bed and I thought, had I not said that, had I been like,
Yeah.
okay, just give it to me, I'll do it, I would have probably put it in the washer and then went to sleep, forgot. And then he would have woken up the next morning, it would have been wet and he would be mad and I would feel horrible because I fell asleep. So
Hmm.
it's little things like that. It's recognizing sleep is important to me. I need it to be, at my best the next day.
Hmm.
How to say no in those situations where that situation needed a no. No, I'm going to sleep.
Yes.
I can't do laundry. How to say that, and then how to really recognize the benefit of, when that works out. You know, so and
Yes.
there's so many areas in life when we can do little things like that.
I love that example. Well, I can relate to that example and I love that example, but I love specifically the focus on paying attention to what happens after we set the boundary. Because I think that's
Exactly.
why a lot of us don't do it at this time in our lives is that we're afraid of the fallout or the pushback or
Yeah.
the consequence or the guilt or whatever it is that we're not willing or able to do anymore. And so we just keep going and keep going to the point of exhaustion and burnout.
Yeah.
And so again, this is just like making me think about this transformational time in our life where we get to start being more decisive and
Yes.
saying what we mean and meaning what we say, and doing it in a loving way, that this is not
Exactly.
out of spite. This isn't because I don't want to help you, but this is just because this is more important to me right now. Like, I have to sleep.
Yeah.
If I can't sleep,
Yeah.
then everything goes sideways.
Yeah. I can't, like, sleep is very important, and it is a very big priority right now for me. And so, yeah, and that's sort of drove that, boundary, and
Yeah.
it worked out beautifully, and it very much surprised me because I really did not expect him to say okay, but he did.
Yeah.
And so now, I have courage, and I guess I have the ability now to say no in more areas regarding things that come at me at 9 p.m. because, I did it
Sure.
before. So
Yeah, absolutely. And he can figure that laundry out, and then we've now learned a life skill that we can continue to do. I love that. This has just been such a great, refreshing take on the mental health side of things. It's encouraging to hear that, you have a practice that's geared towards working with women on reclaiming and empowering themselves at this stage in the game. And I'm wondering if you have any go-tos, like books, tools, websites, communities, that if women are interested, or even men are interested in checking out, like the New Menopause by Mary Claire Haber is like sitting on my bookshelf in my office right now for all women in this stage of life.
yeah.
But what are some other things that you recommend with women and men that want more?
So I think that this book, Estrogen Matters, have you read this one?
Ooh, I have not. I'm adding it to
Okay,
my list.
got to read this
Estrogen
one.
Matters. Okay,
So
Estrogen
this is a book
Matters.
that really started the whole conversation on, based on kind of what these other books are written on. This is the
Yeah.
revised edition, but
Okay.
it's a bit sciencey, but if you're into that kind of thing, this is great. I
Yeah.
love that one. And then I
Okay.
have this one too. I think
Yeah. The New
this
Menopause.
basically is a much easier way to read that one,
Okay.
but that one has a lot of good information too. And then this one
Sure.
is one that I just recently got, How to Menopause.
How to Menopause by Tamsin Fidel.
Yes. So
Sorry if I'm botching that name.
no, that's okay.
Yeah.
So Tamsin is
Okay.
a journalist who went through this herself, didn't know what was going on, and basically went to all the top experts to interview them. And
Awesome.
but it's kind of like if your older sister who is friends with all the top menopause doctors
Yeah.
and has gone through it herself, wrote a book of how to actually go through it. So
Oh,
very, very easy to read,
yeah.
not sciencey. She sort of filters the science stuff through her journalistic, and then makes it very easy to read, very easy to understand. There's lots of different guides,
Hmm.
and she even talks about divorce and thoughts about that in relationship.
Okay.
So that's a great option too. So I think you just, whatever you're into, whether it's science or a little science and a little not, or just a more of a how-to guide, those three are really great.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm going to link all of those to this episode on social media so that people can check those out. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing those. Do you have, almost wrapping here, but do you have any advice for women that maybe they're in perimenopause or menopause, or they suspect that they are, and they're starting to really struggle with some symptoms and some life changes? What's one piece of advice you would tell somebody?
I would say that you are not broken. You are not alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there are people that can understand you. There are people that can help you.
Hmm.
And whatever this is, you're not just one version of this. You are multiple versions of yourself, and it just happens to be we can be changing the version, right now. So yeah, I would just say
Yeah.
there's so much support out there, so many people that understand.
Yes. Yes. And to keep advocating and asking questions and
Yes.
yeah, don't take no for an answer. If you feel like something's off, you
Yeah.
keep asking questions. I love that. I love that. Last but not least, listeners in the DFW area, I'm sure are gonna want some resources. Where can they find you?
So you can find me on my website. It's Mandi with an I, Dixon, LPC.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm also on Instagram at Menopause Counselor.
Okay. All right. So Mandi
Yeah.
Dixon and then Instagram Menopause Counselor. And I'm going to link all of these resources to this episode along with Mandi's contact information. So if you want to get in touch with her, you will know right where to go. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, Mandi, that you
Thank
agreed
you.
to come on and talk about this. This is so
Of
important.
course.
You're
Thank you
helping so
for
many.
having me. I love it when people are, open to hearing about how much mental health, I'm sorry, how much menopause can impact mental health. And we didn't even talk about brain
Yeah.
fog and not being able to get your words out, which I really
Oh
struggle
my
with a lot.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yes.
I talk
Yes.
about I talk about that a lot on my Instagram, and sometimes I will make videos when I can't get the words out, just to
Yeah.
let women know that it happens, and I'm still over here doing it. It's okay. Yeah,
I'm so grateful that you ended with that because I
yeah,
have to tell you the number of times that that happens to me. And I mean, I myself, I'm in perimenopause. And so I remember the women in my life, growing up kind of struggling to find the
yeah,
words. And rather than fear it, we're like, oh, okay, here we are. We're in brain fog. Let's
yep.
be
It
patient with
happens.
ourselves.
Hmm.
Oh, thanks again, Mandi. This has been so lovely to talk with you. And I just look forward to getting to meet up with you in person and
Yes,
hopefully
I
in the
look
near
forward to
future.
that too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If this podcast resonated with you, it would mean so much to us if you'd be willing to take a few minutes of your time and do a couple of things. First, can you please follow or subscribe to the Unmasking podcast? This is helpful for you because you'll never miss an episode. So, to do this, go to the Unmasking podcast show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give us a 5-star rating and share an episode that you loved with a friend, we would be so grateful. The Unmasking podcast is created and hosted by Cindy Payne and Sarah Vaught. And you can also find more information by logging on to our website, theunmaskingpodcast.com. There you will see opportunities to subscribe as well as apply to be a guest on our show. As always, we're so grateful for you, and we hope you join us next week for a new episode. Thank you.